Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun is an often overlooked, underrated film in a career of culture-defining highs. Harrison Ford murdering a sword-wielding assassin in a Cairo marketplace, and groan-inducing, eye-rolling lows. Eric Bana's sweaty orgasm in Munich. Made between Indiana Jones sequels, Empire of the Sun is a tonally difficult film. Its boy's own high adventure jarring with scenes of pubescent sexuality and wartime atrocity. This is Jim. Jim is writing a book on contract bridge and designing a man-flying kite. He can recognise and name every World War II era aeroplane and would be on ADHD medication or diagnosed with ADD if he was a student at your kid's school. The novel, J.G. Ballard's semi-autobiographical book of the same name, has sat unread on my bookshelf for many years. After a recent trip to Japan and resurgence of interest in the period, I decided it was high time I read the book. Having read Schindler's Ark, I assumed Spielberg would have stuck reasonably close to the source material. I expected the film to have merged characters and the story to be streamlined. What I didn't expect was just how dark and post-apocalyptic the novel was. Like the film, the novel is a fictional account of the author's childhood experience, detailing the events of the Japanese occupation of Shanghai and subsequent internment of its expat population. Unsurprisingly, the novel tends to have a lot less Spielbergian kid-friendly hijinks than the film, and a lot more detailed observations of starvation and pus-dripping facial sores. From the outset of the novel, we're exposed to the death and violence that surrounds the European enclave. Even prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor and Japanese declaration of war, there are dead bodies in the fields, streets and rivers, public executions and casual brutality. For instance, the beggar outside of Jim's home at the beginning of the film is already dead in the novel. The family Packard crushes the beggar's foot on their way to the fancy dress party, leaving a tyre print that Jim observes is unique to their brand of tyre. Jim felt sorry for the old beggar, but for some reason he could think only of the tyre patterns in his foot. If they had been driving Mr. Maxted's Studebaker, the pattern would have been different. The old man would have been stamped with the imprint of the Goodyear Company. When Jim enters the abandoned aerodrome behind Dr. Lockwood's estate to play with his balsa wood plane, he peers inside rotting coffins that projected from the loose earth like a chest of drawers. He even remarks on how intriguing the yellowing skeletons are in comparison to the freshly dead he saw each day in Shanghai. Although we do see one brief image of coffins floating along the Bund, we really don't get this pervasive sense of death in the film. Spielberg clearly wanted to keep his PG rating and marketed his film to the broadest possible audience. In hindsight, that may have hindered its popular appeal more than helped it. Schindler's List received an M rating in Australia for its graphic depictions of violence and is considered one of Spielberg's greatest achievements. Downplaying the violence in Schindler's List would have been considered insulting to the memory of those who experienced the Holocaust. And he certainly wouldn't have included a scene in which the girl in the red jacket comically jumped from rickshaw to rickshaw while being pursued by Nazis. Speaking of which, the novel's version of this scene is obviously much darker than the film. In the book, the Chinese youth attempts to saw Jim's hand off with a pocket knife to steal his watch rather than just steal his shoes. Jim takes this in his stride though, as he is relatively accustomed to this world. When his servants fail to do as he asks, instead of saying, "You have to do what I say," like he does in the film, he shouts, "I'll kill you!" A number of scenes that take place between Nantou Stadium and Jim's final liberation from Longwire internment camp are also omitted from the film. Many pages of the book describe the time after the war has ended and in Jim's mind before the next war, World War III, begins. Jim knew he had seen the flash of the atomic bomb at Nagasaki even across the 400 miles of the China Sea. More important, he had seen the start of World War III and realised that it was taking place around him. The crowds watching the newsreels had failed to grasp that these were the trailers for a war that had already started. One day there would be no more newsreels. The only scene filmed from this period involves Basie's return to camp and the murder of Jim's young kamikaze pilot friend. In the book, Jim encounters and allies himself with a variety of despicable characters who would feel right at home in a zombie apocalypse. They fight and kill for ownership of Nantou Stadium and the deserted internment camp, as well as the refrigerated containers full of food that are parachuted into the surrounding countryside. This is the only part of the novel that felt superfluous and drawn out. Spielberg's version tightens the drama in the lead up to the story's climax, and in many ways surpasses the novel in creating a satisfying conclusion. Spielberg mirrors actions and scenes throughout the film to visually illustrate character details and development. For instance, Jim sings apathetically in the cathedral at the beginning of the film, then later sings the same song as the kamikaze pilots prepared to depart, reducing the camp sergeant to tears. Jim watches as his father absent-mindedly strokes his upper lip, then recognises the same gesture performed by Dr. Ransom. Jim's parents stand beside his bed, foreshadowing the magazine advert that Jim substitutes for his fading memory of his parents. Jim enjoys the freedom of being home alone by cycling around his kitchen and living room, then performs the same act of rebellion when cycling around the empty internment camp. Spielberg and his scriptwriters also do a good job of filling in some information that is only alluded to in the novel. In both stories, Jim covets a pair of oversized golf shoes. In the novel, when we jump ahead 3 years to the imminent downfall of the internment camp, Jim already owns the shoes. Conversely, the movie details the acquisition of the shoes in a linear fashion. The prisoner brings his golf shoes to camp. The prisoner with the golf shoes is dying in Dr. Ransom's hospital. Dr. Ransom rewards Jim for intervening in his beating by giving him the golf shoes of the dead prisoner. In the book, Dr. Ransom tracks down Jim's parents. They're traumatised from their own experience of the war and spend the final pages recuperating in their family home. Jim, meanwhile, co-opts their driver to take him on tours of Shanghai and the internment camp, which is now being used as a military base by the British and Chinese. J.G. Ballard ends the book with Jim and his mother boarding a ship to England, leaving Shanghai forever. Jim stepped onto the gangway, conscious that he was probably leaving Shanghai for the last time, setting out for a small, strange country on the other side of the world which he had never visited, but one which was nominally home. Yet only part of his mind would leave Shanghai. The rest would remain there forever, returning on the tide like the coffins launched from the funeral piers at Nantou. Spielberg's ending is much more hopeful. Jim is liberated by a group of American soldiers, then shipped off to an orphanage which is visited by people looking for their lost children. Jim's parents arrive, and as recognition dawns on his face, they are reunited. The film ends as he closes his eyes, finally allowed to rest. Spielberg's Empire of the Sun diverges from the source material in small yet significant ways in order to achieve moments of pure cinema. It might lack the grit of the novel, but Spielberg, with the help of John Williams' score, has managed to take a harrowing account of the trauma of war and occupation and turned it into a coming-of-age movie that is poignant, joyful, and optimistic. Thanks for watching.